And I had decided that, life is short and I need to do what my heart is telling me to do and what I really want to do.
Welcome to Leaders of the West, a podcast for innovators and changemakers. I'm your host, Jessie Jarvis, the founder of the West, and I'm sitting down with agriculturalists, entrepreneurs, executives, and everyone in between with the goal of digging into the strategies, mindsets, and lessons that have been crucial to the success of ag and Western. Whether you're carrying on the next generation of your family's operation, starting something from scratch, or determined to climb up the leadership ladder, we're going to inspire you to continue to dream big, growing not just you, but the future of agriculture and Western as a whole. Let's go. Before we get started with today's episode, I want to tell you guys about the directory. I know I've talked about it before, but the directory is the only spot on the internet where you can connect and hire freelancers and contractors who are agriculture or Western based. You can find anything from graphic designers to photographers to business coaches, copywriters, event speakers, social media managers, web designers, videographers, bookkeepers, accountants, marketing agencies, and that doesn't even begin to scratch the surface of all the businesses and entrepreneurs who are listed. And as I mentioned before, they all have businesses that focus on the agriculture or Western industries. They get what you do because that's what they do. They understand all the little details that make ag, Western, and the equine industries what they are. So the next time you need to find somebody, instead of making an I'm looking for post on Facebook, just use the directory. You can search by category, location, type of program they need to work in. Any way you can think of needing to search, you can do it. And it has been game-changing for a lot of the businesses who are listed. I just got an email yesterday from someone who told me she had been speaking pro bono, but she wanted to make speaking a personal revenue stream this year and really go all in. She created a profile on the directory, and through that, she booked her very first paid speaking opportunity. Is that not the coolest thing? And that's not the only success story that we've seen, but I will say no matter how many of them we hear, every single one of them is so rewarding, not just to me, but to our entire team. If you're an entrepreneur or a business and you want to be listed in the directory, all you have to do is create an account, fill out your profile, and then you can pay monthly or annually. There are new entrepreneurs and businesses joining every day, which is awesome for those of you who are using the platform to search. Whether you're somebody who's looking to hire a freelancer or a contractor, or you're one who is looking to be found by new clients and customers, you guys can go to ofthewest.co/directory to find out more. That's ofthewest.co/directory. You guys are going to love today's episode. We are sitting down with Emily Konkel. She is the executive director of the National Reined Cow Horse Association. And she has such an inspiring story of how she has truly worked from the ground up within the National Reined Cow Horses organization, starting as a shows manager, moving all the way up through various positions until now, being at the helm for the last couple of years. Emily is somebody who I have had the pleasure of working with when we host our Career in Cowtown event, which is held in partnership with NRCHA during their Celebration of Champions and the World's Greatest Horsemen back in February. This is the second year that we have hosted that event with them, and it has just continued to grow every single year. We have great plans for next year. But again, through that process, I've been able to work with Emily, and she is somebody who really knows her stuff. She is so dedicated to the equine industry, to the sport of reined cow horse, to the members, to the sponsors, to trainers, horse owners, breeders, anything and everything, which is a lot of different hats to wear and people to manage. And that's a big lesson in leadership. So we talk a little bit about all of that in today's episode. You guys are thoroughly going to enjoy this. I know you will. I absolutely had a blast sitting down with Emily. With that, we're going to get right to today's episode. Emily Konkel, welcome to Leaders of the West. Emily, thank you so much for sitting down with us today. I'm really excited to let our listeners get to know you a little bit better. I have a feeling that they've probably heard of you. I know that they've heard of National Reined Cow Horse Association, which you are the executive director of. This is a very big leadership role for the cow horse industry. You guys are the membership association for the reined cow horse world. Can you walk us through your journey and how you got to basically where you are today to kind of give people a little backstory about who you are?
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be a part of this podcast, and I love what you're doing for the Western industry. So thank you. So to start, I grew up in Michigan, born and raised there. I have 3 sisters, and none of my family did horses, didn't own horses, nothing like that. So I was the first one to get bit by the bug, and I was about 5 years old when it started. My best friend in preschool, she actually had horses. And so I'd go over to her house and ride. And her mom used to joke with my mom and say, one of these days you're going to be buying a truck and trailer and it's all downhill from there. And that is exactly what happened. So I started showing horses at a young age, and that continued through my entire life. When I was about 17, I really thought I wanted to train horses. And in Michigan, there's not as big of a Western industry out there. So you get kind of laser focused on what you can do. There's not as many opportunities that are at the forefront up there. So, I thought training horses is what I want to do. And my parents said no. And so they said, you got to go to college and you got to get a degree. And, at the time I thought that was a horrible idea, but looking back now, it was a great idea and I'm very glad I did it. So
isn't it funny? Our parents, they actually do kind of know stuff, don't they?
They know stuff. Yeah, they know stuff. I didn't think that at 17, but they do know stuff. So I went to college at Michigan State University and I got my degree in agribusiness management. When I was at Michigan State, I was a part of the equestrian team and I was a part of the Horsemen's Association. And so those 2 groups really afforded me some opportunities that I didn't have. So the Horsemen's Association, I was actually the lead of their green and white horse show. And so that was the first horse show I put on. And I was like, wow, people do this and they can make money doing this. So I should look into this a little bit further. So at the end of my college career, everybody's goal is to leave college with a job. So I had accepted a job as a grain buyer for a local company out in Albion, Michigan. And I started working for them for a few months. Really, it didn't last long. And I had a pretty tragic event happen in my life, which really, it was a tragic loss. And it just really reshaped my view on life and the direction I wanted to go. And I had decided that, life is short and I need to do what my heart is telling me to do and what I really want to do. So I picked up and I moved down to Oklahoma with some family friends, and I just started doing really odd end jobs. I was a manager at a Western store. I was working on a racehorse farm, just cleaning houses, whatever I could do to make some money. And then I started working contracted horse shows. And I would go to the horse shows and just work in the show office, and I really enjoyed doing that. And so eventually I found a job with the Oklahoma Quarter Horse Association. And I was their executive secretary. It was in Oklahoma City and, kind of my first big girl job in the horse industry. And it didn't pay much, but, it was my way to get my foot in the door. And so I took it and I saved as much money as I could, with the job. And I met a lot of great people that were and still are very influential in my career and getting me to where I'm at now. So used those relationships and worked for Oklahoma Quarter Horse for a couple years. And then I had an opportunity outside of the horse industry. And I was thinking, if the grass is greener on the other side, there's some money to be made over here. And so I gave it a shot. I don't even think I lasted 6 months. I was like, this is horrible. I can't do it. I need to go back to the horse world. And I've always had a pretty good, moral compass to tell me where I needed to go. And so I went back to doing odd end jobs. I knew I could make enough money doing it. And I started working contracted horse shows again. And I actually ended up moving back to Michigan. And then a friend of mine called me and she said, Emily, I think there's a job opportunity for the National Reined Cow Horse Association. You should email their executive director or call him, which was Jay Winborn at the time, and see if that's still an opportunity. So I had jumped right on it because at that point I was looking for a full-time job. And I bet I got told no, 10 to 20 times before that. And so reached out to Jay. He said, yeah, we do have a position here. Come on down and we'll do an interview. And I don't think he realized I was in Michigan. So I was like, okay, I got to get down to Texas tomorrow. So I went down and a couple months later, he had offered me a position as shows coordinator, which was just an entry-level position, but I was happy to take it. And so we had about 6 people that worked in the office at that time. So it was a small, close-knit group. And I learned a lot from those people and they were extremely helpful to me and to my knowledge base of the cow horse. And so started there. Eventually, I moved up premier event coordinator, where I oversaw our 5 premier events. And then from there, I was operations manager for just a little bit and then executive director. And I've been in this position since 2023. So it's been a wild ride, but very fun and very grateful for the opportunity.
Oh, I love that you bring up the fact that you came to Reined Cow Horse in a entry level position, and you have since moved up to now being at the helm of the organization in a pretty short window of time. How long have you worked for NRCHA?
Since 2018. I started in June of 2018. So this is my 7th year with the organization.
And oftentimes, again, I think that it is so important. How many stories have we heard about people who they started in an entry-level position and have slowly worked their way up, and that is how they've gotten to where they are. And I think that those types of people are far more successful than in situations where you just come into a company and you are instantly in the C-suite because you have seen that specific company from the ground up. You started in the show's office. You then did all of the premier events. Then you were operations manager. So when it comes to putting on an event like Celebration of Champions and World's Greatest Horseman, if you now as executive director make a decision that is going to impact whoever is putting on the show, it's coming from a good place because you have also been in their shoes and you understand all that it takes to put on an event like that or any of the other premier events that you guys put on, but just using that as an example. So I can imagine that it makes you a little bit more aware or have a different perspective when it comes to like leadership and decision making.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly right. And you kind of hit the nail on the head. I mean, I would like to think anyways that I have a pretty good understanding of what is happening at the horse show at all times. You know, I could either step into any position or I could get somebody that I know could step into that position and help because I have a good understanding of what needs to be done to get the job done. And the other thing is I'm not too proud to do any position because I've started from the bottom and the bottom has a big importance. You know, that's not just anybody's job. You know, you've got to pick the right person for that and they're your base. So I think that's just one thing to keep in mind for people too, is that entry level is just your first step, but there's a lot of steps you can take after that.
Oh, absolutely. And entry-level positions, again, they may be your first step, but they are crucial. You know, everybody talks about the janitor, like nobody wants to be the janitor, but at the same time, what happens? You could walk into the biggest, prettiest building or brand new home on the market, and if the trash is piled high all the way to the ceiling and the floors are dirty and sticky because stuff has been spilled, like, are you going to want to spend any time in there? Absolutely not. Like that role of the janitor is absolutely vital to the overall experience of walking into that building. Or again, using that as an example, but entry-level positions, there is nothing wrong with them. They are absolutely crucial. You have to have every job in a business in order for that business to stay afloat.
Absolutely. Every position in any organization or business is important, and you can't forget that.
No, going back to just Reined Cow Horse as a whole, you guys have a very deep-rooted history. As somebody who is, again, at the helm, helping to guide its future, what does that responsibility mean to you? Because again, you've been here since 2018. So this is, I'm going to say relatively new, less than 10 years. So what exactly does that mean to you?
NRCHA has such a rich history, and it's something that we love to focus on and put at the forefront and address constantly in our marketing and with our membership and that sort of thing. So when I first started with NRCHA, my colleagues, the ladies that I worked with, they were great about teaching me about the history of NRCHA. And I think that that is so important to have within the business and the knowledge for your staff. And so that's something that I always tell my staff to kind of keep in mind when you're making plans and marketing and coming up with programs or new things, that this is where we came from. And we always want to reflect back on that because the World's Greatest Horseman might be the greatest show that you've ever seen, but it came from somewhere and we have to recognize that and we have to respect it. And so, you know, I like to keep it in the back of my mind constantly, and I try to train my staff to do the same thing.
Well, and your sport specifically has grown tremendously in recent years. I mean, in the time that you have been with Reined Cow Horse, I can only imagine how those membership numbers have grown. So from your view or vantage point, perspective, whatever you want to call it, what do you think is really driving that momentum? Any kind of equine sport is not necessarily cheap to get into. So there is a barrier of entry. So when we see that these Western sports numbers are growing in number of competitors and people who are participating and buying horses, I think that really speaks volumes, because it's not like the game of checkers where you can just go to Target or Walmart and buy a board and you're in. Like, there is a little bit of a barrier of entry there.
Yep, absolutely. Well, I think the thing that really catapulted all of us associations in the Western industry was, and you've probably heard it before now, but COVID, you couldn't do anything else but be outside, and, you were kind of restricted on what you could do. You couldn't go to the movies anymore. Your hobbies got locked down for a little while, but one thing you could do is you could still ranch. That never stops. And you could ride horses. And so I think we really saw growth from that, because all of us horse organizations, we worked really hard to continue having our events, and those facilities worked really hard to make sure we could be there. So we saw a big jump in participation and membership at that time. Additionally, right around that time is when Yellowstone was so popular, and, what Taylor Sheridan has done to make cowboy cool again has absolutely helped us all. So, those are two things that I really think have impacted the entire Western industry, but cow horse specifically, we have such a great product. Nobody else is doing the fence work. And they're certainly, if they're trying to, they're not doing it at the level that our guys are. So it's such a fun sport to watch. And there's, the highs and lows of it. And it's almost like NASCAR, like when there's wrecks, you can't look away, and there's, big things that happen, and there's big losses. And it's just a very emotional sport, even for the guys and gals competing in it. It's very emotional. But I think that, those opportunities with more eyes on the Western industry, and then to see a sport that is really doing it has brought us a lot of growth.
I think that cow horse to watch is the most exciting Western sports event that there is. Because again, there is so much horsemanship that goes into, the reining and the cowiness of a horse and the rider, and that connection in the cutting, and then the trust and skill that goes into the fence work aspect. Like, those men and women, they really are the real deal. They have to have such a wide number of skills. And same with a horse, right? When it comes to cutting, and I'm not throwing anybody under the bus, right? But a horse has to be good at one thing, right? You're good at the cutting, or you're good at the reining, or you're great at barrel racing or team roping. But in the reined cow horse, you've got to be good at all three. And so the amount of horses that are able to fit the mold and do all of those very, very well, obviously there's a limited selection of that as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's not an entry level sport. And a lot of times, when, of course, we have the reiners and the cutters because we're all discipline based, but I don't think that we're like the reiners or the cutters. Our sport is a little bit harder to get into, and it's not an entry level, like just throw your leg over and see how it goes. I mean, that is like a death wish. Honestly, don't do it. If anybody says do it, don't.
Yeah, what is that they say? Like, this is a trained,
Right.
a trained professional.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, it's a tough sport, and it takes a lot of skill, so much horsemanship. You've got to have the right horsepower under you. And then, you're running 20 to 30 miles an hour wide open down the fence with another live animal next to you. Like, that is not happening anywhere else. And so it's very dangerous too. And that's something that, we try to do our best to make people aware of, and have the right things in place in case there is accidents. But man, it's a rush. So,
oh boy, is it ever. Okay, so we talked about kind of the growth side of the reined cow horse sport and the organization as a whole. But with all growth, that doesn't necessarily mean it's all great, right? So what do you see as some of the biggest challenges that are facing the sport, or maybe just Western sports and our industry as a whole? I would be curious to have your perspective on that.
I think one thing that is always going to be fighting against the Western industry are those groups like PETA and organizations that are not in favor of the Western lifestyle and agriculture. And we're facing some things right now with the Horse Protection Act and things like that. And what we are responsible to do as associations is to educate these people on what we are actually doing with our horses. We care very deeply for our horses, and most people spend more money on their horses than they do on themselves. So just teaching the public about what we're actually doing really helps. Of course, you're always going to have some people that, just don't want to hear it, but most people, I think, are reasonable and they just don't know. So that's always going to be a problem. Whether we like it or not, it's always going to be a problem.
No, it is. Those types of groups are, unfortunately, they'll never not exist.
Yeah, exactly. With cow horse specifically, I think some of our challenges that we see is the length of time that it takes to do the cow horse, because you have to do the herd work, you have to do the rein work, and you have to do the fence work. It's not like a barrel race where it's 16 seconds and you have a run. You have 3 days worth of runs to put together. So, as our sport grows, which is great, we really have to figure out how do we handle all of these entries, because nobody wants to be at a horse show for, 2 months. You just physically can't, but there's a lot to get through. So we're having to start thinking about being a little bit more adaptable and making our event work in a specific amount of time, because a facility is not going to run us 60 days. We can't afford it. People can't afford it. So that's one of the challenges that we're starting to see kind of rear its head, and working with our board and our staff to figure out what is the best way to handle this.
Well, and I love that you bring that up, just because, again, what we do is so rooted in tradition and history and, the Western way of life. But innovation is really the key to longevity in everything. So I absolutely see this as kind of okay, we have to keep the sport and discipline as it is. We have to maintain it. But also, how do we continue to innovate so that we can continue to get the amount of people who want to be involved? Because you don't want to have to start turning people away and saying, oh, like, our show's too long, you can't come, you can't interrupt. Like, that's not going to be great for the association either.
Right, exactly. Yeah. That won't feel good to anybody. If somebody's new and they want to try it, they should have an opportunity to do that. So we do have to get a little bit more creative with our scheduling and our timing and things like that to make it work.
Something else that you probably have to get a little bit creative with in your specific role, you work with competitors, sponsors, industry leaders. You have a team of people who work specifically for your organization. That is a lot of different hats and types of people to manage. So what is a leadership lesson that has maybe kind of stuck with you in your role? Or how do you manage those different interests, if you will?
When I first took the role, I was kind of on the fence about it. I love the operational side of it. And I knew that stepping up into this role was going to mean, I've got to interact with a lot more people and wear a lot of different hats, just like you're saying. And it was an insecurity of mine to be able to do that, because I thought, well, am I politically correct enough? And, am I polished enough to handle this role? And, those kind of things that, just insecurities that creep in. And I realized that, I am offered this role because of me and the job that I'm doing. And so I am good enough for this. And what I bring to the table is exactly what I need to. So a leadership lesson and a life lesson I think I've learned is just to be myself and just to care about these people. I do care about them, and I want their experience to be great. And I want to listen to them and hear them through. And, you get caught up in the day to day and you just get so busy. But just being a real person, I think, is so important, and being relatable to these people is so important. And I think that helps people be a great leader.
Well, something else that I think is really unique about you, and specifically the role that you're in, obviously, there are a number of women who compete or who are involved in Reined cow horse, but there are definitely more men. I think of just this year, Erin Tormino, she was the first ever woman to capture the world's greatest horseman or horsewoman title, whatever we want to call it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's tons of notable women in the industry. There's Debbie Crampton and Annie Reynolds and Sarah Dawson, and like women are what make the sport like so exciting to watch, right? Just because they can hang with the men. But the association is definitely more male dominated than female. And that's very true for our industry, right? There are more men in our industry than women, whether that is Western sports or agriculture. What are your thoughts on, because again, we're not necessarily feminists, but at the same time, like it's cool to be a woman and be respected and looked to as a leader in your industry.
Yeah, absolutely. It's such a great opportunity for women, and not to be, a feminist about it or anything like that, but it is such a great opportunity. And I think that it's wonderful that women are being recognized and they're being honored for, the work that they're doing, whether they're showing a horse or leading an organization or working in an organization. I mean, their role is important, and what they bring to the table is very different than what a man brings to the table. And everybody needs that TLC from a woman that, a man maybe can't provide. So I think that there's a level of thoughtfulness that goes into a woman's decision making, which makes that a little bit more powerful, in my womanly opinion.
Well, and two, I mean, obviously I called out some of those competitors that are well known that are females, but when you, again, go to an event like Celebration of Champions and you see the banners that are hanging from that arena, there are women in the breeders. There are obviously pros. There are non-pros. Like there is anybody and everybody who is involved, again, male or female, but women have carved out a space in every one of those areas. And I think that it is really impressive, just again, not to be feminists, but to know that, 100 years ago, women couldn't even vote, right? So It wasn't that long ago where women couldn't own property or do things like that. So to know that women as a whole have prevailed and have really made a name for themselves. And I do feel like, this is my opinion, but in our industry, women are very well respected because we do work alongside our male counterparts, and our male counterparts are often like, they know the skills that women have. I think in other industries, there is definitely more of a male versus female, but in agriculture, in Western sports, I think that we are definitely very lucky because the men that I have worked with and been around and have been raised by, they don't treat me any differently.
Yep. I totally agree with that. And I think that, the men, they don't care who you are. They don't care if you're male or female. So that's why, I think both of us, we don't want to say we're feminists because it's not like that, but it just means that there is a space for women here, and you can do a great job and you can be recognized for your hard work and your efforts, and the men are going to high five you when you do it. So it's awesome.
No. And again, to make sure that we are not feminists, for all of you who are listening and you are a man, thank you for being so supportive. It really does. Like, because we know that there are other industries where women probably aren't as accepted. And
absolutely,
agriculture and Western sports is definitely one where we are, and it is not lost.
Yep.
I don't want to speak for Emily, but on me either. And, being raised by my dad having an incredibly supportive spouse in Justin, we couldn't do without men. So Please don't feel like that we're ragging on you, because we're not.
Not at all. Not at all. It takes all of us.
It does. It does. Okay. So speaking of which, taking all of us, there are a lot of people who are listening to this who maybe they want to work in the horse industry, but like you, weren't raised in the horse industry. So what kind of advice would you give somebody who's wanting to build a career in this space? And maybe they're coming at it from a similar walk that you had where they weren't raised on a ranch or the daughter or son of a horse trainer. What advice would you give them?
Well, I would say that you can't be too proud to do anything. You have got to say yes to every opportunity that you're given. And eventually you'll find the right spot for you. But you've got to be willing to get out there and get your boots dirty. And, don't expect to be paid six figures right off the bat. Be willing to prove yourself and put the hard work in and the hours and keep a good name and a clean name, and you will succeed. Especially in the Western industry, we notice those people all the time. We're looking for those people. So, I think my biggest advice would be don't be too proud to do anything.
Oh, I would absolutely echo that. And I would also just say too, stop thinking that you're not welcome or that you don't have enough skills. Like, yeah, you probably don't have enough skills. How are you going to get them? By jumping in with both feet and getting wet and figuring it out. So don't use that as an excuse. There are plenty of people, and we've interviewed a number of them on this podcast, like Emily, who weren't necessarily raised in the industry and have made an incredible, very well-established name for themselves, all based on their effort and what they put into it. So there's no excuse that you can't do it either.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, we're going to go to our rapid fire round. So we typically have the same 5 questions for everybody, but I'm adding in a 6th for you. So we're going to get that one knocked out of the way first.
Okay.
If you could steal the skill set of any legendary counter horse trainer for a day, who would it be and why? Maybe it's not even related to horsemanship. Maybe it's leadership or something of that nature, but whose skill do you want to steal and why?
So one of the most well-rounded human beings, I think, that I would love to steal his skill set for a day is Todd Crawford. Not only is he an incredible horseman, but he is just so wise, and he's done so much for the cow horse industry, and he constantly is thinking ahead. I mean, he is wise beyond his years, so I would love to steal his wisdom for a day and, just come up with some of the ideas and the programs and the efforts that he has come up with would be incredible.
Okay, well, because of that, we may have to reach out to Todd and get him on the show just so we can pick his brain on that.
Yes, he is a good one.
Okay, what do you want people to remember most about you?
I think I would want them to remember that especially in this role, that I do care. I have put my heart and soul into this, and, I really care about what they think and what they want. It doesn't just roll off my back. I want this to be great, just like everybody else does.
Well, and I can tell you mean that in not a I care what people think about me way, but like when we make decisions, it is every input has been taken into consideration and it is all weighed out prior to making the decision that we have made. Like we don't take those types of things lightly.
Exactly.
What is a non-negotiable in your life?
A non-negotiable for me would be family time. With my family still in Michigan, I actually have one of my sisters, she's in Kentucky, but whenever we are able to get together, it's just so grounding for me and brings me back to life and just recharges my battery. So that's a non-negotiable for me.
Oh, good. If you were a professional athlete, what would your walk-up song be?
Okay, so being from Michigan, I am a big fan of Eminem and Kid Rock and all the good ones. So as inappropriate as this song is, I think it would have to be Cowboy by Kid Rock. That is the coolest song.
Okay, that is a very fitting song though, right?
Exactly.
And then we have Kid Rock, who is riding a horse down the Fort Worth stockyards.
I saw that.
With a big media day for Kid Rock rock and roll. Like, how cool is that he actually cares about our industry?
I love that he's getting in the industry. I'm like, I have got to meet this guy one day.
Okay, well, we're going to put that into the universe. Hope maybe May, Kids Rock and Roll Rodeo, maybe that will be Emily's opportunity to meet Kid Rock.
Let's hope.
If somebody out there has a connection, please make it happen.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, what is the smartest thing somebody's ever told you?
Smartest or most impactful, but my grandma told me, she said, be brave and pray for God to show you what he has in store for you. And I'm sure it'll be wonderful. And I think that that's just one of those things that when you tell God your plans, he'll laugh. And so God's plans are always the best plans and what is supposed to happen for your life. So whatever you think it is, just put your trust in him and he'll guide you.
Oh, I love that. And I absolutely echo that. Okay, last question for the day. Favorite things. Do you have a favorite book or podcast or maybe a service, a product, some kind of life hack, something that has maybe changed your life and you just want more people to know about it? Now is the time to pimp it out. So
I really love self-help books. And by reading, I mean audiobooks, of course, because, I'm busy. So I love to listen to audiobooks. And one that I've listened to several times in my life now is Brene Brown's Dare to Lead. And every time I listen to that book, I have a different takeaway from it. So I'm listening to it for at least the third or fourth time now. And there's just always such good lessons and content in there and different takeaways. So, I love to continue to learn and to educate and try to be the best Emily that I can be. And that's what I like to do.
Brené Brown is an incredible author.
She's brilliant.
She really, really is. That is maybe somebody that I would totally want to spend time with, being a fly on the wall.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Oh, well, Emily, it was so great to spend time with you today and really getting to share you and your story and that journey of how you started from the bottom. Now she's here.
Well, that's right.
With our audience. Thank you so much. For anybody who, you can go follow Reined Cow Horse. It's NRCHA on Instagram. Is that right?
Yes. Yep,
okay.
The NRCHA.
The NRCHA. Thank you. This was incredible. You are just such a wealth of information and knowledge and insight. And it was an honor to get to share that story with people today. For those of you who are listening, do us a favor. Make sure to share your favorite takeaway from today's episode. Tag us, tag NRCHA in stories. It means the world to us. And we know that there's something out there that absolutely was the mic drop moment for you. We want to hear about it. And of course, we will be back here next week with a brand new episode of Leaders of the West. So until then, stay tuned. Thank you, Emily. We will catch you guys back here next week.
If you loved this episode, do us a favor and share it with someone else who might find just as much value in it as you did. We're on a mission to continue to grow and strengthen the future of agriculture and Western industries, and you spreading the word helps us make more of a positive impact. It also makes a big difference when you take a minute to go rate and review the show. We can't thank you enough for listening, for sharing, and for loving Ag and Western as much as we do. We'll see you back here for our next episode.